Bonjour. My name is Brian Cham, and I'm a vexillologist with NABA, the Flag Institute, and the New Zealand Flag Association. I'm a firm believer in the power of flags to inspire and unite diverse people, and the most ambitious attempt in contemporary times was the national flag referendum of my homeland, New Zealand, in 2016. Instead of an isolated event, the referendum fits within a broader social and political journey with unresolved questions. For the 10th anniversary, I interviewed key insiders, including the Prime Minister, for their reflections on its legacies and lessons. My retrospective will show that instead of being a settled matter, this historic event remains part of our nation's ongoing conversation about postcolonialism, identity, and multiculturalism, potentially influencing a future reconsideration of the national flag. Looking abroad, the findings also offer practical lessons for any other locations considering flag change. To give a quick recap, New Zealand's current flag, based on the British blue ensign, was adopted in 1902. Since the 1970s, we've embarked on a journey of gradual independence, with milestones like removing the word British from our passport cover, adopting Māori as an official language, fully ending the White New Zealand immigration policy, and adopting our own national anthem in both English and Māori. All these recognise a distinct and diverse identity, maintaining unity and inclusion among the ever-changing, polarised, and multicultural society in the South Pacific. But throughout this broader trajectory, many have asked, what about the flag? The one exception to these changes. Supporters of change pointed to our status as an independent, multicultural society, integrating people of many non-British origins, like other European, Asian, and Pacific Island backgrounds. And of course, our flag's constant confusion for Australians, like this snapshot from Amsterdam's airport. Those against change have pointed to our continued links to the UK, the long history of our flag, and the lack of a strong contender. But the central question is, what exactly is New Zealand and New Zealanders? Are we still an offshoot of the United Kingdom with primarily British culture? Or have we evolved to an independent, post-colonial society that can define itself on its own terms? Would replacing the Union Jack be dismissing history? Or acknowledging a more pluralistic society than the one our flag was originally designed for? As part of our journey, society has shifted enough in the 2010s to seriously consider changing the flag, and Prime Minister John Key launched a two-stage referendum. The first stage asked voters to choose their preferred design out of 5 finalists. Then, the winner went head-to-head against the current flag in the second stage. Results were announced on 24th of March 2016. Approximately 44% for adopting Kyle Lockwood's black, white and blue silver fern flag, and 56% for retaining the current flag. We were left with no change, but plenty of unresolved questions about whether we had properly addressed the underlying question. If society was ready to officially consider a new flag, what went wrong, and what can we all learn? To get answers, I spoke to voices involved at all levels, decision makers, designers, and other advisors, for their reflections. Their responses were striking. The common theme was that the public will for change was greater than the result implies, but the pathway made success difficult. So let's go through the main questions. Question 1. Did we approach the flag question the right way? Former Prime Minister John Key was very blunt that he made a big mistake. I asked what he'd do if I offered a time machine to redo his vision, and he just said, I just changed the flag. He said, in hindsight, a referendum was a big mistake, because referendums aren't very effective. They're always better for a no campaign than a yes campaign. It's really easy to articulate things people might hate. He said he would have let his coalition in Parliament, outlined here in red, to vote directly to change the flag without a referendum. Key is confident that, quote, we convoluted ourselves with too much process, $20-odd million of it. All I had to do was change the act, and I could have gotten 61 votes in Parliament to do that. There'd be a lot of moaning from certain people. 3 months afterwards, everyone would like it. He's confident it would be in line with other major flag changes initiated by elected representatives, and wishes that the public would understand that flags are never set in stone. Well-known examples of change include Canada, South Africa, and Minnesota. He says, people don't realize that a lot of countries do change their national flags. Canada was a classic example of where New Zealand was at. I also spoke with Malcolm Mulholland, a member of our Flag Consideration Panel, who spoke at ICV 26 in Sydney in 2015. He maintains that the referendum structure was ideal, despite its high cost, because it brought the public along, saying, I don't know that we could have done it another way. However, he's countered by vexillologist Ted Kay, author of the famous Good Flag, Bad Flag. Around the time that we were considering a new flag, he chaired Fiji's flag commission and met ours to exchange thoughts, giving him an inside look. Now he has a sharp critique, saying the process was fundamentally flawed. The people involved were just trying to make the best of it. I wish I'd had a chance to advise the government. He objects to a structural flaw in the final ballot that pitted the current flag against Locke's proposal, saying, people who don't want to change vote no. People who want to change but don't like the alternative design also vote no. So there are 2 no votes to every yes vote. Thus, with 2 lanes to vote no and only 1 lane to vote yes, no matter what design was on offer, even a strong voting base supporting change gets split by the design, and many join the ranks of those voting no. So the second question, was the flag alternative chosen the right one to offer? After voters rejected Kyle Lockwood's black, white and blue silver fern design, many have wondered whether it was really the best design to offer as our new national flag. To my surprise, even its own designer isn't sure, saying, at a lot of time, people didn't like the black. In 2016, the black and white colours in silver fern were less common and more associated with sporting logos. But to any future in-house designers, he reveals that the black version of his design now outsells his red version, suggesting it has grown on public since then. And he's not the only one with the red. Mulholland now says that the design, quote, felt like a compromise at the time, a bit of old and new, and people came to desire something more bold and distinct, making it too weak to embody national identity or justify change. Prime Minister Key went even further and criticised the entire body of public design submissions altogether, saying, if you're going to get everyone to chip in on design, it's like how a Cham is a horse designed by a committee. He reiterates the theme that public participation may offer legitimacy, but not necessarily a well-informed result. So coming from the man who designed it, the man who chose it, and the man who ran the whole thing, the answer is pretty negative. But if that was the wrong choice, then what design should a future campaign pick? Many interviewees recommend a stylized silver fern on black, which I've marked up here. They emphasize that the silver fern represents the country in many areas beyond sports. It's now on our currency, logos, products, the passport, the Air New Zealand livery, and more. Mulholland appeals to historical significance, saying, when you look at the symbolism in the world wars, it tended to be the silver fern or the kiwi, not so much the New Zealand flag. His history thesis has demonstrated that it's actually a myth that our soldiers fought under the New Zealand flag, that they did use the silver fern emblem, like this badge. And Key appeals to universal recognition, saying, if I hold up the silver fern to 1,000 people, whether they're New Zealanders or not, what do they say? New Zealand. It's simple, like the maple leaf. He says that as Prime Minister, he was arranged under the Australian flag many times, but everyone recognised the silver fern lapel badge. Lockwood also points to a resurgence of Māori imagery in national branding. So could the Tino Rangitirotanga flag, also known as the Māori flag, be a solution that's visually distinct and recognises our Indigenous culture? Its last living co-designer, Linda Munn, remains strongly opposed to adopting it as a national flag, explaining, we've sold off enough of our culture, and it will always stay in the hands of Māori. She reveals that in 2015, she was approached with a government offer to include it as an option in the referendum. She flatly refused to the officials, declaring the meeting to be a waste of her time, and challenged them, why don't you design your own flag? Third question, was the referendum even about flags or about John Key? Even if the referendum structure and design was stronger, it was still vulnerable to the public associating it with John Key and using it as an approval vote. John Key says that when he proposed change, he hoped for broad support from all parties, as the opposition parties also favoured change. Unfortunately, he lamented that, quote, referendums become politicised. Labour and the Greens had a policy to change the flag. I just took them at face value. But then they got all their people to vote against it. In politics, people just have an argument because they want it, not because it's the right thing to do. There's no grounds for it. In his view, others hijacked the referendum as a politicised vehicle for opposition to him personally, opening the floodgates that it was his personal vanity project, especially after he publicly endorsed Lockwood's design in national media. Making matters worse, two variants of Lockwood's design were later selected as finalists, fueling the accusations of personal bias. Lockwood even says, "It confuses me to this day. They could have just chosen one." And Mulholland, who consulted the public nationwide as part of his work, concurs that many of the public, quote, looked at their decision along political party lines, and many voted against change, just to get back at Key. The perils of design endorsement are affirmed by former Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who shared his first-hand experience of Canada's national flag change with Key during our effort. Comparing both countries for lessons again, he agrees that our politics got in the way. He said that in Canada, the design that was the most popular by all evidence was this. But why did it not become the flag? He points to the Pearson-Pennant proposal in the centre here that didn't make the cut. Said, ultimately, because it was the choice of the Prime Minister. If people think the leader is trying to impose his own flag, that will be the one not picked. And I think that's part of what happened in New Zealand. There was a sense that the government wanted a certain flag, and so that got rejected. Fourth question, what flag really won the referendum? The most remembered design from 2016 wasn't Lockwood's design or the national flag. It was actually the unexpected and infamous laser Kiwi gag. Mulholland reveals that among the flag consideration panel, he said, some of us jokingly said, let's just include it. But knowing the public, it could have been the design that people voted on to have a laugh or make a mockery of the process. And it is now ripened beyond an inside joke to reach international saturation as imitations are entered into many flag design contests worldwide. A recent example is the laser loom, submitted to Minnesota's 2024 redesign of its problematic state flag. Louis Fitch, chair of Minnesota's Flag Commission, calls a big smile on first seeing the laser loom and thanks us for our influence. He said, I didn't know the full backstory at first, but I soon learned about New Zealand's laser Kiwi flag and realized we were seeing a kind of second generation being designed. Even though it was never a serious contender as an official flag, it played an important role. The laser loom now adorns public library cards and anti-ice protest flags in Minnesota, perhaps the most unexpected legacy of New Zealand's flag referendum 10 years on. Now for the last question. Does the flag question remain relevant? The insiders concur that 2016's result, approximately 44% for change, was narrower than expected, and the underlying question is even more relevant to society today than it was 10 years ago, suggesting that if the referendum were conducted this year, it would pass. Prime Minister Key reflects that, to his surprise, many figures he expected to be conservative were on board, saying there was real desire to change. Even the Queen was sympathetic. Mulholland points to changing demographics, saying, I certainly think our ethnic makeup and immigration policy, which has changed the social fabric of the country, has changed in turn the attitudes toward the flag. I would say more people are amenable to having it changed than previously. And Lockwood is surprised about continued interest, saying, I thought it would all die down a couple of weeks after the result. I'm still selling flags a decade later. Insiders cited evidence about increasing multiculturalism. Our latest census reveals that Auckland, our biggest city, now has the fourth highest foreign-born population in the world. A third of our nation's population was born overseas, and we represent 200 birthplaces and 150 languages. The social shift has prompted different reactions. Social science research shows that colonial ideologies have gradually declined. But there's also been a backlash, including anti-immigration rallies, where foreign flags were burned, suggesting that symbols remain highly charged, and there is still the need to actively unite a post-colonial, multicultural society. The statistics show that Wikipedia's referendum article still attracts more than 200 daily hits, demonstrating continued interest in the subject. And our local profile is growing, with exports on the rise, suggesting a need to make ourselves known with a more distinct symbol. Insiders even had advice for the next people to revisit the national flag question. Mulholland thinks we should wait until the Union Jack changes, and Lockwood thinks we should wait until we become a republic, but others are more decisive. Prime Minister Key says, "My advice? Just do it. Without a referendum, it could be done tomorrow." He thinks the idea has enough support in society now, saying, "So many people have said to me, I didn't vote for change, but I wish for habit." That's the overwhelming feedback. And Ted Kay offers two important pieces of advice. Make the decision to change the flag, and don't hold a public vote. It's politicians chickening out and saying, "I don't want to be the one that people are mad at when the new flag is adopted." Mulholland said his panel functioned well, but a future one should appoint members from design and vexillology backgrounds, saying, "I would have members of the design and art community there." They weren't part of the panel. Maybe we look for a vexillologist-based designer. I think the addition of a vexillologist would have been beneficial. Channeling international experience, Ted Kay also stresses expertise, saying a public vote on flags is like voting on how much steel you should put in a bridge. When it comes to designing it, that should be left to the experts. And he praises George Stanley and Jacques Sincere, the specialists behind Canada's iconic design. So after speaking with insiders at all levels for their reflections, the overall lesson is clear. The national flag remains a question deferred rather than a question settled. Although the 2016 referendum retained the existing flag, it also legitimized flag change as a serious national question and is best viewed as a valuable set of lessons for any future attempt. If you remember only one slide from my presentation, make it these 5 lessons. Lesson 1, use legislation to update a flag rather than a referendum. As expressed by the Prime Minister who initiated it, referendums are risky, uncertain, and prone to partisan politics. Lesson 2, confirm the flag change before deciding on designs. As expressed by a vexillologist involved in many changes, focusing on designs too early will split the voting base, and dissatisfaction with one design may lead the process astray. Lesson 3, ensure that experts design the new flag. As expressed by a panel member who chose the design, an amateurish flag design may not evoke the resonance and affection required among the public. Lesson 4, expect joke entries, but don't let this define the main legacy. As expressed by 2 different commissions around the world, joke entries get the public talking, but shouldn't overshadow the serious legacy of the process. Lesson 5, avoid political endorsements. As expressed by 2 prime ministers who have seen this go wrong in their countries, political support behind the scenes is necessary, but political endorsement in public media may contaminate the flag as the symbol of one party or leader. A successful redesign would need to learn from these practical lessons, whether revisiting New Zealand's flag or any other society undergoing shifts in identity and symbolism. Drawing on New Zealand's case study, we can help societies achieve unity through iconic and inclusive flags. And I'll finish with John Key's encouraging message for why it still matters. He says, in the modern world, we can all identify what takes us apart. Our population, our ethnicity, it's all changing. The flag is used as that rallying tool for building that sense of what brings people together. It has real consequences. Achieving a greater binding together is greater than any kind of monetary thing. Thank you very much for listening. I invite you to scan this QR code to get my contact details. Please stay in touch. And if you have any questions after this presentation, feel free to message me at any time and I'll be happy to respond. Tēnā koutou, thank you very much for listening. Merci beaucoup.